All right. Okay, that kicked off. So just welcome everybody. My name's Pat Wright. I run Utah Geek Events. I'm helping to kind of put on the competition and help organize it a little bit. Chris here and Peter will be kind of the ones going over most of the rules and regulations and all the things around that. I'm here to help answer any questions too around any of these things though. But I'm going to yield the floor to Chris and Peter so they can start going over these things. We did record this, so if somebody on your team doesn't see it or isn't available to be here, they can come and see it later on too as well. We'll put it up on the website on the where you signed up. So Chris, take it away.
Great. I'm Chris Wiltsey. I'm with Bike Utah. I run a program called the 1,000 Miles Program. So I support communities throughout the state in funding and planning out bicycle facilities. I'll get into that more a little bit later, why we're even running this competition. But if we could go around and everybody just quickly introduce yourself and what team you're on. And we'll start with Peter.
And I'm Peter. I'm the Director of Economic Development at UVU and the Business Resource Center. I also run a smart cities organization called Utah Ignite. It's part of a national program called US Ignite. We help run the National Smart Cities Conference. And I also run the Utah IoT Meetup page that we set up a few years ago. So, who do you want to go next, Chris?
Anson, am I saying your name right? Sorry, you muted yourself again.
Hi, I'm Anson.
Anson, okay.
And then our team name is Nefili Bata. Also, Mars is here as well on our team.
Dale.
Dale Murray, Clan Murray. We probably have to change the name because now I have some non-family members involved, but that's what we're going to go with for the moment.
Sounds good. Mars.
Hey, I'm Mars, and I'm with the Netflix with Anson.
Cool. Michaela.
Hi, I'm Michaela Murray, and I'm also on the Team Murray one.
Cool. Alex.
I'm Alex. I'm also on the Team Murray one. So.
Okay, cool. Great. Yeah, so this is the kickoff meeting for the competition. It looks like we had 3 teams sign up, but it looks like we don't have representation from one of the teams. So less competition, I guess. Let me just get into kind of the background of this competition and why we're doing it. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to just raise your hand. I don't know where the raise your hand feature is in Zoom. Maybe just physically raise your hand up. That'll be easier.
It's under reactions.
Okay. Okay, so why counters? Why is this the competition? Why do I care about them enough to run this competition with these other gentlemen? I guess fundamentally, one of the issues we run into is that counters are very expensive as is. So most counters cost anywhere from like $1,500, and those are like very basic counters to up to like 10,000. And the counters that I generally see being purchased by local governments are about $4,000. And they are, they're pretty okay. But a lot of local governments don't want to buy a lot of those because they are so expensive. And some of them have issues with maintenance and sort of just kind of keeping an eye on them and collecting the data. So one of the big issues, can you see this whole map, or is there like a big black spot?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. If you look at this map, this is from the upcoming planned Provo Transportation Master Plan. And what this shows is proposed bicycle facilities, and that those geometric shapes in the middle, that is based off of this platform called Streetlight Data, and it uses your cell phone pings to estimate what kind of vehicle you're traveling in. So it could be walking, biking, driving. It's very expensive to use. So like just for Provo, to get what we had for a year, it's like $100,000. So very cost prohibitive. But what this one is showing is bicycle ridership. So it's just like a heat map of bicycle ridership in Provo. And it shows this high concentration of ridership in the urban core of Provo. But then you see where they've planned everything, and it's like a big box around where everybody's actually riding. So that's kind of the major issue, is because we don't have good counts or ideas of how many people are riding and where they're riding. A lot of times it's just sort of guessing as to where we should put the facilities. But we had access to this, so I was able to do this visualization. But this isn't normal, right? So for most of the state, they wouldn't be able to afford this. So that's kind of the issue we're running into. And the problem is, so this is a picture of State Street in Orem. And this is the #1 place people ride in Orem City. So you can see this guy right here. But it looks kind of like a sort of bicycle hellscape, right? It's not very friendly. I wouldn't feel super great riding there. I actually have rode there, and it's pretty uncomfortable and doesn't feel very safe. But the reason people are riding there is because the vast majority of people in the state, from what we can tell from our data collection, are actually low-income individuals who are riding for practical purposes or utility purposes. So this is a bunch of scatter plots of communities in Utah County that are like the correlation between income and ridership. And with a few exceptions in more wealthy communities, generally there's a negative correlation between income and ridership. So the more money you make, the less likely you are to ride. And we're finding that's the case just because of kind of what I was saying. It's low income people, sometimes they can't afford to drive a car. It's estimated that car ownership is somewhere around $9,000 a year, the cost. So that's gas and insurance and all these other things on average. So it's very expensive. So my point being, if we're just guessing, a lot of times where people are actually riding, it looks like this. And we create these great facilities in places where people aren't necessarily riding. So that's why we need good bicycle counters, and we need to make them more cost effective to make it more so we can create like a widespread network of counters. So these are the minimum specifications of what we are looking for. We want it to be affordable, an upfront cost of no more than $1,000. Because back to what I was saying, they tend to be very expensive. So we want this to be a competitive product. We want it to regularly send updates remotely. We want it to provide remote diagnostic data, because one of the problems we found with even those $4,000 counters is they can just stop working. And sometimes you don't know, because you actually have to go out and collect the diagnostic data with like a cell phone with Bluetooth. We want it to be wireless, requires minimal maintenance and upkeep costs, connects into existing data platforms, easy to install, differentiates between user types, so it can tell between like a pedestrian or a cyclist, determines directionality of counted users. And let me back up. The differentiation between user types is important just because sometimes that doesn't matter. So if you put it on what's called like a multi-use trail, so think about like a really wide sidewalk that people are riding on and it's dedicated to bicycling and walking, that's less of an issue. But let's say we wanted to put the counter in the street where there's a bunch of cars going by. then it becomes more of a problem if it's counting everything that goes past it. So we need to be able to tell what kind of vehicle or mode of travel is being used.
Chris, did you
Determines-
see Dale had a question?
Oh,
Chris, quick
Okay.
question.
Mhm.
What do you mean by existing data platforms?
so for example, they have. Are you familiar with Strava?
No.
Okay, so Strava is like an app people use to track their bicycle ridership or their running or sort of exercise. And so the state has taken all of that data and they have like data platforms that they're kind of creating to aggregate all these different data sources. So if the state or if a community has access to that large data platform, it would just kind of plug into this. So all of the data is kind of coalescing into giving better information. Peter might be able to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of how that would actually work.
Well, I've used Strava, but I haven't seen what the state's doing. But I imagine if you once you're collecting the data, the data mentioned in here, it shouldn't be much trouble to pull that data and put it into the state's data. I mean,
So basically, the data would have to be publicly accessible or at least available to the state in some standardized format.
yeah, typically your customers with this type of product are going to be like the Department of Transportation will be buying this type of sensor and installing it in different places or cities or counties or state governments. They'll be the ones that want to collect the data so they can then use the data to create infrastructure that supports bicycling.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have a group of stakeholders sort of on the back end that represent different government entities. So like the Utah Department of Transportation, which their budget is millions and millions of dollars. And then other regional organizations that are concerned with transportation. And the feeling I've got from them, or not just a feeling explicitly, they've said, if you guys are successful in creating something that meets these criteria, that they're willing to fork out a bunch of money to actually produce these at a large scale. So, I mean, if you're looking for a new career, I guess this could be a great option. But yeah, I've heard them throw out numbers like $100,000, easily to start cranking some of these out. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I guess the point would be just kind of be flexible as to what that data could be inserted into. Determines the directionality of counted users. That's important for different reasons. Just kind of you can tell what route people have taken, where they're coming from, right? Hourly average time of day data, just so we know. That can give us some indication of why people are riding. So if everybody's sort of riding at peak times, so it could be around like 8-9 o'clock in the morning, then we know people are riding to get to work, commuting, or it could just be late at night, and then it's probably more recreation. Data storage solution potentially, at least an idea of where the data would go, and openly accessible to these different entities, these different government entities. Did anybody else have any other questions? Cool.
Christopher, I could interrupt one more time.
Yeah.
Up here on number 4, you say wireless. Are we assuming that we'll have wireless capability in terms of access points to connect to? Or is this going to have to be a cellular setup?
We wanted to kind of stay agnostic on that, as far as like you kind of figuring out what you think works best. Peter has some access to wireless capabilities. You can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, there could be several different solutions. I mean, Wi-Fi doesn't really go too far. You could use a LoRaWAN antenna, which could we've got some actually a LoRaWAN antenna hooked up in our business resource center that can reach 10 miles, and we've got them all around Utah Lake already. So there's different types of LoRaWAN technologies we could use, long range wireless solutions, or you could go mobile on some as well. But yeah, we're kind of leaving it up to engineers and entrepreneurs to come up with what they think would be the best solution for it.
Okay.
Okay, back to you, Chris.
You're on mute, Chris.
The rules. Okay. Sorry, I have my notes down here and it's. Okay, sorry, I'm just gonna read it off really quick. Just because I have some notes down here. Okay, so each team is 3 to 6 members. And it looks like most of you already had about 3 members to your teams. Each team must register through the registration form. We've already done that. Okay, so event communication, posts, discussions, all of that kind of stuff. It's going to be handled through a Slack channel in the Bike Utah Slack space. So at least one member from each team will need to be part of that channel to get updates, announcements. So I'll send out this slideshow as well to all of you, so you'll have it. And I'll also send a link to that Slack space. So we'll just be having mini events like this remotely throughout the event. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay, so timeline, kickoff, brainstorming, ideation. That's starting now, February 16th to March 1st. So you'll just be coming up kind of with your idea. You can be communicating with us, sending us emails, calling us, whatever you need to do to get a good idea of what you need to do. You can also be building up your teams at this point. So it doesn't need to be like concrete at this point, who's on your team. You can keep adding people or kicking them off if need be. Then March 1st to April 5th will be the build period. So you can just be kind of testing stuff out, building stuff on the back end. Peter, can you talk a little bit about potentially what services you may have open, or if any, at your place?
Yeah, we do have some things in place. We have some servers there. We have 3D printer. We should have a pick and place machine soon, and some other things that you could possibly use if you need them at the Business Resource Center. I know we've ordered a bunch of equipment still on the way, some of it. So yeah, you're welcome to come use our labs or our space to work on the projects too at the Business Resource Center.
And don't hesitate to use something like Maker's SLC or something like that too, because there's other places out there. I don't know what they're open with COVID right now, but I know that there's other maker spaces available too. Use whatever resources you can, pretty much.
Great. Yeah, so there will need to be some kind of physical product. So Peter, can you talk a little bit about like maybe some of the people if they might want on their team to make that possible, having run one of these competitions before?
Well, I mean, you're gonna have to have somebody that understands the sensor side, and whatever type of sensor you use, whether it's a proximity sensors or video sensors or whatever types of sensors used. There's different approaches you could probably take in this competition. So I don't know, you might need some electrical engineer or somebody with that type of background that understands how to build those technologies. that understands wireless connectivity and how to make it work, and that understands the software that's going to be required to collect the data from those sensors and store it somewhere at that point. But a simple explanation.
Great.
I would also add, having done a couple different competitions and stuff, is get yourself a project manager or appoint one. Because in reality, all of the technology and everything else ain't going to work if you're not actually doing it. So trust me when I say make sure someone is actually keeping the project in line and keep going and things like that. So
Great. And we'll have periodic meetings in between each of these periods where we'll just meet up and we can talk shop and just sort of touch base. And then week of April 12th, we'll figure out a date that works for everybody to do kind of a pitch session, like a Shark Tank thing, I guess, where you guys can show what you've come up with, and we could talk through it at that point. Yeah, so at the end of this competition, you should have some kind of working prototype. Doesn't need to be perfect, but it should be like a good sort of proof of concept of what you're planning to do.
Chris, how long should they plan for the pitch? Should it be just kind of a 1 hour presentation is what we're going for here, something like that, or a little bit less?
Yep, probably a little less. I don't know. How long do you usually do your pitches, Pat?
I mean, a pitch can easily be a 15-minute sort of sales presentation, that sort of thing. I think what I would shoot for is some sort of 15-minute presentation talking about the sales side of it, but then also 15 minutes of what did you do? The lessons learned, what was your technology, all of that background stuff like that, because I think the people that are grading this and the judges are going to want to know part technology and part how much is it going to work from the sales side of things to use it and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so just to give you an idea of who sort of the judging committee is, or that makeup, it's mostly going to be government employees, but it's going to represent a range of employees. So I'll be on that committee, which I work for a nonprofit, but then there will be people from like the Department of Transportation and some of these different entities, like what I've referred to before, and people from local governments as well. The award will be access to Peter's like makerspace. How long, Peter, is that access going to be?
I don't know. Months or something.
Sorry, what was it?
Well, we could do like 6 months or something. I hadn't really defined that exactly, but I mean, yeah, we'd give them free access to build those products, I guess. I guess we could just give them free access for these products. And then there's some funding as well.
Yeah, and then, yeah, so that's the big piece, up to $10,000. So if the teams, or if a team comes out of this with like a really good product that meets all of these specifications, you can expect the full $10,000. If we don't quite meet all of the specifications, the awarding committee will decide up to that point. But I think safely, whoever wins will still get access to the makerspace. Any questions?
I would add to the point after that is what you're really looking forward to is possibly that contract into the future with those people that are judging and stuff, those departments and everything.
Yeah, so really has the potential to kind of go to the moon if you are able to do what we're asking. Any questions? Does it sound good? Does it sound reasonable? Cool. That is the end of my presentation.
I'll leave the recording up for a minute. So if we have any questions, if we have any final questions or anything on those, Chris, you can end sharing too.
Anson, go ahead.
Hi, I had a question. Yeah, so I was just wondering. You mentioned that we had you guys as a resource. We could talk to you and bounce ideas maybe on occasion. And I was just wondering if you could just give like 1 or 2 sentences on your background, so we know, what we could, ask of you.
Is it pretty clear what I do, or are you talking more like Peter and Pat?
I think I have a good idea, but if you don't mind restating it real quick.
Yeah, so I'm more or less a active transportation planner. So I'm like the end user. I'm the type of person. So if you're if you're looking at like UX kind of questions, like what would be acceptable for somebody who's using it, I would be a great person to talk to. You want to go next, Pat?
So I run other competitions and stuff like that because I run a not-for-profit called Utah Geek Events, where most of you all heard about this. But also my day job is a database person. So I'm an expert in all the different various databases. I also built up the Big Data Utah user group. So I know a lot of data science, data machine learning, and data science people. So if you have anything related to data, it's a great idea to ask me a question. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have the answer perfectly for you because I haven't done a ton of machine learning myself, but I definitely know the people that can answer the question for you. And I also know all the past competition winners of everything that we've done because, well, they were all my competitions. So that's why I bring up the project manager thing. Trust me on that. You really want a project manager. Okay, go ahead, Peter.
So my background is actually business and law, but I've also started the Utah Internet of Things meetup group. Several years ago, I've been just worked at a lot of tech companies, including government tech agencies. We've given out a lot of grant money. I've been on the government side giving out grants to tech companies developing new technologies. And so, but we are building our smart cities lab, and we do have tech people we're helping us build that can be helpful as well. So
would you say it's fair to say you're kind of the business guy? Like if they have questions on maybe around the pitch or things like that?
I do, yeah. I ran an accelerator at a Utah Valley University. We had about 200 tech companies a year coming through the accelerator. We would help them with their minimum viable products, product validation, customer validation, business model validation. So I've been in the entrepreneurial world for many years. So I am available to help with all that.
Great, sounds great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Dale, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, I had a couple of questions. First of all, what kind of infrastructure? I know already talked about internet. How about things like power? Have we got issues here with available public power, where we're going to have to be able to power the device ourselves?
I believe you will. In other words, if it's strapped onto the side of some sort of telephone pole or something else or some sort of device, I don't think you're always going to have power in there.
Okay. Is this a rural or is this urban only? This is going to be in cities only, or could this be somewhere up on the side of a mountain on a trail?
Yeah, I would say assume it's going to be used in a diversity of contexts.
Okay.
But I'll give you a bit of advice there. Do not be afraid of a version 1, version 2 idea. In other words, you're not going to get faulted for completing your device and getting it working and everything else if you say this is only urban, period. If you try to say, nope, I'm ready for everything, and that takes you an extra month or something, that's a problem. So think about these things in that context. I think Chris is totally correct. This is going to go everywhere, but think about your timeline and everything else. Do not be afraid to say, we did just this, and that's what we are here for. And that's what we did. Yep.
And my last question was, are we simply counting pedestrians, cyclists, and that's it?
Yeah, so you're as far as like accessibility, there's going to be people on like trikes, but I imagine, yeah, I guess that sort of
are we going to count a trike as a bicycle? I guess is my first question. If it's got wheels and it's powered by your feet, it's a bicycle.
Yeah, I
type
think
of a
that, I
thing.
think that's fair to say.
If your feet are contacting the ground, you're walking type of a thing.
Yeah, I think that's a
Okay.
fair way to look at it. Yeah. I
And
guess
that's
I'd agree.
it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Excellent questions.
Thank you. That's all the time I want to take up with my questions.
Yeah, think about that, Chris. You think about that in the future, and other points to come up is that you may want to talk about defining some of the things that, what if a motorcycle comes by, again, that Dale, your question is perfect. Do we count it? Do we not? Those are going to be some of the questions that are going to come up.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't know what the limitations of, like, let's say you're using machine learning to sort of differentiate between these two modes. I don't know how sophisticated it would have to be able to tell a motorcycle from a bike, but I would imagine having some contamination is normal.
Yeah.
Well, I would say from a city government perspective, if I'm planning, I would like to know if there are bicycles or motorcycles going through. I'd want to differentiate that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. That's why, I think if you can get it as detailed as possible, that's great. But I agree with Dale on, let's make sure we know what we're actually trying to measure, because that will determine the outcome of it. Okay.
Great question, yeah.
All right. Any other final questions?
Yeah, if I could ask one more question. This might be for you, Chris. You mentioned earlier you use probably just bought data from a cell phone company using the cell phone pings to differentiate. Do you know either in Salt Lake or Provo or anywhere nearby if there are any other systems currently in use or for future use?
Like similar platforms to what I'm using?
Or yeah, I just want to know, like, is there anything that's currently being used, and if there are any, problems with.
Yeah, so Utah County has maybe like 20 counters out, but they're mostly on multi-use trails. So multi-use trails are those really wide sidewalks I referred to that people ride bikes on. And then the platform I'm using, it's called Streetlight Data Platform, and it basically like aggregates a bunch of different data sources, and then it uses machine learning to differentiate between those. So like it'll take like your speed to determine how fast or like what vehicle you're most likely using, and a bunch of other stuff that I'm not quite sure how it works on the back end. So that's the big one that I'm using, and then it creates like a sample of cell phones within your subscription area. So I think in Provo there's like something like 5,000 to 8,000 cell phones that we have for active transportation or for bicycles. So I would say, and then Strava, the Strava data I was talking about before, where people are using the app, but that has a lot of problems with it because it's only people who are riding for recreation generally. So it's not very accurate in showing us where people would normally be riding.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
It's probably also only those that opt in other words, to share their data, because I'm a Strava customer and I don't share mine out of what's going on and stuff like that. So it depends. All right. Well, if that's all the questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording really quick so we can use that for everybody else.